The safe had been empty for 3 years, and yet someone had opened it again last night and left the door standing wide open as though daring me to notice. My name is Nathaniel Vane, and I have made and broken locks for a living since I was 14 years old, a trade I learned from a father who taught me that any door built by one man's hands could be undone by another's, given enough patience. I did not expect that lesson to become the whole architecture of my adult life, but it did the night my business partner, Harlan Bexley, took everything I owned and left me holding a debt with my name on it and none of the money to show for it. We had built Vane and Bexley Safe Works together over 9 years, a modest but respected firm serving the merchants and bankers of the city, until the spring Harlan convinced me to co-sign a loan to expand our workshop, a loan he then quietly diverted through a chain of shell accounts I did not discover until it was far too late, into a private fortune he moved out of the country the same week the bank came looking for its money. I lost the workshop. I lost my father's name attached to a business now synonymous with fraud. I spent 11 months in a debtor's cell before a distant relation's mercy bought my release, and I spent every day since rebuilding a life from nothing under circumstances Harlan never once thought to check on. Because why would a man like that look back at the wreckage he leaves behind him? 3 years later, Harlan Bexley returned to the city, respectable again, wealthy again, having quietly settled his debts under a new company name while mine remained ruined under the old one. And he had the audacity to hire me, through an intermediary who did not know our history, to install a new safe in his townhouse. I took the commission. Of course I took it. I had spent 3 years waiting for exactly this kind of door to open. I built that safe with my own hands, every gear and tumbler exactly as specified, and I built into it, hidden in the mechanism where no inspector or locksmith but myself would ever think to look, a secondary release I alone knew how to trigger, a locksmith's oldest and quietest form of insurance. For 8 months, I did nothing with it. I told myself I was simply patient, the way my father had taught me to be, but the truth is I was frightened of what I might become if I used that hidden door for the purpose I had built it for. Revenge, I had learned in the debtor's cell, has a particular gravity to it, and once a man steps toward it, it becomes difficult to remember exactly where the line was that separated justice from something uglier. It was a woman named Eleanor Prescott who finally gave me the reason I had been waiting for, whether I wanted one or not. She came to my small shop on a rain-soaked evening in October, introducing herself as Harlan's business associate. Though something in the careful way she chose that word told me the relationship carried more weight than the phrase suggested. She had heard, through channels she did not fully explain, that I had once been Harlan's partner, and that our parting had not been an amicable one. He is preparing to do to someone else exactly what he did to you, she said, without preamble, sitting across from me with the particular stillness of someone who has rehearsed a confession many times before finally speaking it aloud. A young engineer named Percy Cole, brilliant with machinery, foolish with contracts, exactly the kind of man Harlan has always known how to find and how to ruin. I have watched him build the same trap twice now for other men since you, Mr. Vane, and each time I told myself it was not my business to interfere. I am no longer certain I believe that. Why come to me? Because you built his safe, she said, and because a man who spends 8 months installing a hidden mechanism he has not yet used is either a coward or a man waiting for a reason good enough to justify it. I am offering you the reason. I will admit I resented her, briefly, for seeing so clearly what I'd spent 8 months refusing to admit to myself. But she was not wrong. In the following weeks, working carefully with Eleanor and with young Percy Cole himself once he understood the danger circling him, I learned the full shape of what Harlan Bexley had built since his return, a fraud even more elaborate than the one that had ruined me, layered through false partnerships and forged signatures that would, Within the month, leave Percy holding a dead Harland had already arranged a profit from twice over. The safe I had built held the proof I needed. Harland, in the arrogance of a man who has never once believed himself capable of being caught twice by the same trick, kept the true ledgers of his fraudulent dealings inside that very safe, trusting its expensive craftsmanship to protect what his own conscience would not. I opened it on a night I had chosen carefully, using the hidden release only I knew existed, while Harland dined 3 streets away at a banquet celebrating his own return to respectable society, an irony I did not fail to appreciate as I worked. I did not take money. I took the ledgers themselves, photographed every damning page under Eleanor's steady lamplight, and returned them to the safe exactly as I'd found them, leaving no visible trace of what had been done except the small, deliberate detail of the safe door left standing open, a message I intended for one recipient alone. He came to my shop the following afternoon, exactly as I had known he would, his composed public face already cracking at the edges. "You are my safe," he said. It was not a question. "I built that safe," I said. "It only stands to reason I would understand it better than any lock you paid for." "What do you want, Nathaniel? Money?" "I can give you money, considerably more than you lost €1." I did not want her money, I said, and watched something genuine flicker across his face for the first time since he had walked back into my life, something that might have been the beginning of real fear. "I want Percy Cole to keep his workshop. I want the debt you engineered against him dissolved before it destroys a man who has done nothing but trust you the way I once did. And I want the ledgers I photographed last night delivered to the appropriate magistrate the moment I have written confirmation that both of those things have happened." He tried, briefly, to negotiate the way I imagine he had always negotiated his way out of every consequence life had tried to hand him, but I had built the trap too carefully this time for negotiation to matter. I had copies. I had witnesses in Eleanor and Percy both. And I had, above all, 3 years of patience that made me considerably harder to rush than the frightened, desperate men Harland was accustomed to exploiting. He dissolved Percy's debt within the week, quietly, through channels designed to look like a generous business gesture rather than an extortion payment, which suited me perfectly because Percy Cole deserved his workshop far more than he deserved to know how narrowly he had escaped ruin at another man's careful hand. I did send the ledgers to the magistrate eventually. 3 months later, once I was certain Percy's position was secure beyond any retaliation Harland might attempt. Harland Bexley's second fortune collapsed considerably faster than his first one had, and considerably more publicly, and I understand he has since left the country again, though I have made no effort to learn where. I did not rebuild Vane and Bexley Safe Works. I built something smaller instead, under my own name alone, with Eleanor as an unlikely but steady partner in the venture, and Percy Cole as our first apprentice, a young engineer who still does not fully know how close he came to losing everything, and who I have decided, for his own peace of mind, never needs to know the full weight of what a hidden release inside a stranger's safe once cost me to use. I think sometimes of my father's old lesson, that any door built by one man's hands could be undone by another's, given enough patience, and I understand now that he meant it as a caution as much as a craft. The same patience that let me build my quiet revenge could just as easily have hollowed me out entirely, had I let it. I did not let it. I used it once for exactly as long as it was needed, and then I set it down, the way a locksmith sets down any tool once the door was built for has finally, fully opened.